In this presentation, we will go through an example progression of plyometric drills. Now, this presentation links back to some research papers which I've added in the description, which you should consider reading to fully appreciate the order of progression exampled here and what adaptations we're aiming for from one stage to the next, such that one potentiates the other. And please remember, this is just an example, but hopefully those papers will help convince you that it's a pretty good one. So the approach taken here is little and often, that is, the athlete has a gentle sprinkling of plyometrics applied to most S&C sessions they undertake, with the drills grouped by colour and the athlete having to be pretty competent at one stage before moving on to the next. How long you spend on each stage depends on how long it takes the athlete to get good at it. So this could be from a couple of days to a couple of weeks or more. And just to briefly explain the grouping of each stage. Now here we're going to start by teaching the opposite of plyometrics, that is, how to get rid of force and energy and transfer it into the ground and away from our muscles and joints. This is good for when you want a soft landing, and while it seems a strange place to start, it really does help when we move into plyometrics in illustrating what we're after when we want to generate and reuse elastic energy. And it ensures that athletes know that there will be circumstances where soft landings are most appropriate. We then move to accommodating the GTO with increases in landing forces. We need this to happen so we can generate muscle stiffness and thus induce stretch in the tendons. We then focus on our ability to use elastic energy, thus bringing us further and also costing us less in terms of metabolic fuel. And by that I mean it's more efficient to use elastic energy than just powering our jumps using solely muscular actions. Now it's time to introduce some chaos and get the athlete to think and make decisions on the fly. And finally, given sport is generally played on one leg, it's a good idea to revisit many of the drills and introduce the single leg variant. Okay, let's have a look at these exercises now, starting with the overhead squat drop. But remember, these are just a few of our favourite exercises from a library of, I guess, literally thousands. And as we go through each section, the video will map back to each of the identified drills noted in this figure. Starting up on their toes, we want the athlete to drop rapidly into a deep squat, sitting back on their heels too. The longer or rather lower you drop, which is essentially the same thing here, the more you dissipate force, the softer the landing. In this drill, we've simply got them to start flat-footed rather than from their toes, which has only really shortened the time they have to drop. The emphasis then is on dropping even faster. Now, with this skill mastered, we can apply it to the standing broad jump. We want the athlete to be able to land soft as they jump further and further. Of course, start short and work up to maximal effort jumps. And what I would say is that you can encourage your athlete to sit back onto their heels if they can, which isn't demonstrated in this video, but this is then going to serve to prolong the descent, dissipate more force and better distribute the forces across the joints. On to box drops now and accommodating the GTO to progressively larger impact forces. So now we make the switch to stiffer landings and thus minimal flexion at the hips and knees with slight forward lean of the trunk. We also want the athlete to land without the heel hitting the ground, but we should only be able to slide a credit card under there. And at first, athletes are going to land like ballerinas up on their tippy toes, and you could roll a golf ball or even a tennis ball under their heels. But all we want is a credit card. So get the athlete to focus on freezing like a statue on ground contact. If you don't have a box or you're doing it in large groups, then fear not, just jump and stick, or jump and freeze. As you get better, you can stay stiffer at ground contact, increase the distance jumped. Remember, always gradual increases in distance as we're looking to accommodate the GTO to these relatively high spikes in landing force. And that takes time and a graduated approach. With the GTO now lending us more force to play with, we can start to train with plyometrics. So our focus now shifts to generating and reusing elastic energy. And as you can see by the drills highlighted in this section, we start by training the ankle, as this appears key to plyometric performance. So with a stiffer muscle, thanks to the GTO for allowing this isometric muscle action to now occur, the force experienced at the joint is used to induce more stretch at the tendon. The tendon will then recoil, sending us further and taxing our metabolic fuel less. These are called Pogos. So just do a few of these, as the athlete will have serious DOMs in their shins the following day. And here the athlete will be actively contracting their tibialis anterior in the air, that is going into dorsiflexion, so they can then forcefully drive the ball of the foot into the ground at landing. These are now just the single leg versions, so way more intense, again until your athlete is used to plyometrics, which when done properly requires them to actively dorsiflex and powerfully plantar flex. The shins will be burning a bit post session. So always gradually build up the intensity. This is straight leg bounding and is a great way to appreciate just how much energy can be stored in the tendons and how little, relatively speaking, it taxes our metabolic fuel stores. Time to get the hurdles involved now and bring the knee joint in too. Here the athlete will jump over a series of micro hurdles, aiming to convert all that mid-air potential energy into elastic energy. Remember, stiff landing, so less flexion, which is going to be evidenced by shorter ground contact times. So really promote them to get off the ground quickly. Cues like imagine jumping on a hot tin roof or the floor is lava usually work. As they get better, start to increase the distance between the hurdles, but make sure it doesn't go beyond their ability and just turns into a series of standing broad jumps, which will be evident by a ton of flexion as they seemingly collapse at landing and a big old ground contact time. Then set the cones up as short long and short long. This is to check they are in control of each jump and not just falling forward. Now we switch to jumping for height rather than distance, and as always start gradual and build up in height. So first we want the athlete to explore doing a counter movement jump over the hurdles versus a drop jump. And by this stage of their plyometric training, hopefully they find the drop jump easier, as this is going to obviously be adding a ton of potential energy into the mix. And if they don't, then the box or hurdle may be too high relative to their ability, or you progress them on too quick. And speaking of which, if we had other hurdles available, we'd use smaller ones in these videos too. As per the micro hurdles used to train distance, start adding in additional hurdles, again ensuring the hurdles are not too high for the athlete, perhaps unlike in our videos. Again, let the athlete start with and without a drop jump to better understand the drills and discover what's actually going on for themselves. It's now time to bring the unpredictability and chaos to the drills. And now the athlete must adjust the hurdles of varying heights and distances, as well as in multiple directions. Then the athlete starts blinded to the hurdles obstacle course, and they must simply turn and navigate it on the fly. And here we're beginning to make it more of an open skill, with the athlete having to think quickly. And also feel free to request that one hurdle be jumped with a 360-degree turn, for example, so the athlete can decide which hurdle they perform it on as they navigate the course. But this condition is something else to think about on the fly, making it a bit more cognitively challenging. But ultimately for chaos drills, just be creative. Here we're preparing our athlete to be reactive to an opponent. In this drill they drop and jump to one side or the other, all predetermined at this stage. They also have to experiment with how they perform the rebound jump, again helping the transition for when they react to an opponent, have to give chase for example. Now we make it reactive and the coach will delay the hand signal until the athlete is in the air. So this drill should also be progressed such that the coach simply turns and runs to the right or left and the athlete must respond accordingly. And this is going to help the athlete hone in on the relevant kinematic cues such as the hips. And then they should be able to respond to mid-air collisions and land safely. And even be able to adjust at landing to eventually sprint again. Right, now we have to go back and do the whole thing on one leg. So we can travel forward as per linear sprinting, or travel laterally, nicely preparing us for changing direction. Note that in this video the jump requires the athlete to push on the inside of their foot, which is good for teaching side steps, shuffles and cuts for example. If the athlete was to travel back the other way on the same leg, they would use that outside of the foot, which would prepare them for the crossover step for example. And all of these speed and agility drills, which as explained here would be preceded by plyometric ones, are shown on another video which follows a similar format to this one. This skiing drill is also great and nicely prepares the athlete for training agility. Naturally, we just introduce it bilaterally first. And then we progress to unilateral ski jumps. Well, we stopped short of demonstrating the single leg versions of chaos, but that should be self-explanatory at this point. So hope you enjoyed the presentation and big thank you to Tyler and Abby for helping me make this video.